Another tremendous panel here at the Engine Performance Expo, and we're still going, Lake. We're still going. Of course, Dennis is back. Saw Dennis right at the very beginning of the show. Mark, we just spent a fair amount of time learning about your career. Just so amazing. I realized that I love learning about people and their lives and careers. Mm-hmm. There's always an amazing story. Jon Kaase, who I was super excited, a moment that everybody missed yesterday, happened after hours. John over there checking out Project Pontiac. You know, he brought a Pontiac block like that to Engine Masters a couple of times. Pretty amazing, of course. And Mr. Keith Dorton back. And we're going to delve into something early in the day. Darren brought us through the very restricted world of building horsepower in a super stock A Hemi situation where you're absolutely restricted by the rules makers. And we're going to talk about that versus engine development where you have no limitations. And I think that's kind of interesting since, you know, Mr. Kaase said, let's build these giant engines out of nothing and created something that didn't exist previously. So I'm very interested in that. Let's start there. Like clean sheet of paper versus within the structure of what's already there.
Well, when we started on the big engines, you know, we've been doing this for 30 years, you know, or more. We were using a lot of passenger car parts, passenger car blocks and stuff like that, and you know, it all evolved to where we kept getting bigger and bigger and everything would tear up, so they kept building different blocks and different height blocks, finally they put a cubic inch limit on us for the big inch pro stock stuff, which is good because who knows where it would have ended, you know. But you know, all the stuff today it's pretty much made out of billet parts, and you can make it strong. You can make it the right cubic inch without really pushing it where it's going to tear up, and it's easier. It's a little harder to get some of the parts, but you know when you're going together with it what size it's going to be and how it's going to perform. You know, it's a little easier than it used to be.
Well, I think that's it. You look at that and you compare it to what Darren was having to work on.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah.
What those limitations are. But I think those limitations are where I'm going to look at all four of you and say, you've had that in your career, where you were in that box, where you had this little part, and you're like, man, this thing sucks, but that's all I got, so I got to make it work.
Well, I'd rather have the limitations myself, you know, a lot of rules, because I don't know if it saves you any money, but mostly it probably does, because you can't get that far away from where you're supposed to be, but I would prefer a lot of really tight rules myself.
Yeah, because we are our own worst enemies when left to our own devices.
Yeah.
And we saw that in NASCAR when we started the qualifying engines, and there was no rules on anything. The flip side of it, technology was going crazy, making things lighter. You know, the fuse only had to be that long.
There was a fuse?
Yeah, we loved it as engine builders making horsepower. We did, and I missed those days, but I don't think we had any control, and the cost, you know, became so high.
Costs were out of control. But I said you loved it, but we also were saying we loved that in retrospect too. There was a lot of days you did not love that.
That's correct.
When you had a bunch of scattered parts, and I got to get this together, and you got crew chiefs yelling at you, "Where's my engine?" and
that's right.
Everything, and So, would you agree too that the more rules?
I'm a rules guy. I mean, and again, I'm go back in history a little bit. So let's just analyze stock eliminator NHRA racing back in the day. You had to use stock parts, which I'm sure you remember, and you would have guys literally buying boxes of, let's just say, small block Chevrolet rocker arms, and trying to find the best 16. So the best whatever you could get, because you had to run that. So that was rules, and to me, that allowed your imagination, you know, and your engineering mind to go ahead and try to find the best of what you had to work with. You know, this gentleman's been involved in NASCAR actually longer than I have, and I think not having strict rules in NASCAR, and I might get shot when I get out the building here, but I think that was a bit of a demise for NASCAR as well. They allowed the rules to get so far out of whack that it costs so much money. I mean, let's just look at oil pan development in NASCAR. Okay, for the longest time we were running if you will, a steel pan with a windage tray and dividers, nothing fancy. All of a sudden we had to have billet oil pans. How much did that cost you guys?
But we still run that.
I know, but look at the development money.
You can't go back.
It took you. Well, I guess not. But look at the development money,
right?
And just the CNC bills. And all they had to do was stick with an oil pan that was easily policeable, if you will, and they could spend the money somewhere else. Now, again, I'm a rules guy, and the only problem that I have is because I'm a rules guy, I followed the rules too close. Okay, so I wasn't a good cheater. Okay, so I'll have to go on the bottom of the list on that. So, but that kind of makes you want to cheat.
Yeah. So what do you think, Keith? You have the widest arc of experience here.
Oh, yeah.
We can't agree to disagree, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just kind of the opposite. Well, for instance, it's probably already been discussed the last 2 days. Flat tappet camshafts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we still have series that mandate a flat tappet camshaft, and you know these poor guys, they they try to break a camshaft in, and they're going through 3 rebuilds.
Yeah.
Before they get it to
just trying to get a camshaft to break in.
John's right. There should be limitations. They have to be, because you know it just,
you can't be blank.
But some of the rules. And I've always thought the people that are making the rules are the ones that have less knowledge about what's going on than anybody else. And whether it's political or whatever, I don't know. But I mean, and I've been part of some groups, organizations, associations, whatever, where we tried to help because we were for rules. Smoking unit was part of the group. Mm-hmm. But and when we went to the sanctioning bodies, you know, here's how we can make racing better, save the car owner who's paying the bills,
right?
Save him some money, and boy, were we blackballed because, you know, well, we know what you're doing. You're just trying to get an advantage for yourself. So we were looked at in the wrong way. So there's got to be limitations, but boy, it'd be nice to have people like us that's in the trenches to know, you know, guys, we tried this and it don't work.
Common sense. That's what.
Exactly.
I think a good engine builder and a good car owner, common sense would help everybody.
Right.
Well, just look at the spec motor programs. So we have a customer that builds spec motors, and you know, of course, I get an opportunity to talk with everybody, and I asked him, well, what's your spec motor rebuild? You know, because I was curious about price and what it costs the racer, and he said, well, which version? And I said, what do you mean, which version? He said, well, we have a stage 1, a 2, a 3, but 4, you have to put your own seals on. I said, really? That's all I need to hear. Yeah. So what? I don't know. You know, I love rules.
Yeah.
But they have to be enforced, and everybody has to want to follow them.
I know there are a lot of spec motors go across your dyno.
Yeah, we've seen a few with some of the series. They'll bring them in, and basically after the race they might bring the top 2 or 3 finishers and run them across the dyno, and it's a good gauge. And you'll find a lot of things racers do that before they even get to that point to try to, you know, they might have an extra 5 quarts of oil in the pan on a wet up motor. But you definitely, it's a tough deal to police, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, the racer is going to be the racer.
Yeah.
They're going to try to find their advantage. And if they have a good advantage, like you said, put special oil in the wet up motor to try to hide that advantage.
So like Keith, I like having rules and guidelines to go by, but it's the ridiculous things that we have to do. Or the guy trying to break in his camshaft. We all remember the days we had to run them, right, before we come off this roller. And we've lived a lot of nights in the dyno room, you know, and then we may be back in the home before it was done, you know, trying to put that thing back together to go.
So point of emphasis here at the 2024 Engine Performance Expo, it has now come up 2 days in a row. Rules makers, get rid of the flat tappet cams.
I'd say so.
Right?
That's pretty resounding.
It's not helping anymore. Maybe at one time it was well-intentioned. But what are some of the other things, Dennis? Like, you know, throw some things out on the table that you think are not in line with common sense solutions.
Well, these may not affect
in your universe.
In my universe, and it's changed. The diversity of work have changed for our business model. But even at the upper levels of NASCAR with with weight rules on parts. You know, we all run, and you have a piston ring company. We're going to go after, if we can figure out how to make that thing run with a ring that weighs 5 grams for the set, we will. But they never, they could have put weight rules on things, I think, to protect us from ourselves from spending money. You know, and there's other areas in the motor, I think, that hurt us there. But the things they did that helped, like in NASCAR, is they put a gear rule in. Okay, so our engines wouldn't last more than a race in a day. We run them for 4 or 5 races now, you know, and they last. You know,
because of the gear rule.
So many other things have come along.
Right.
You know, we've done a lot of other things in the engines to keep the pistons cool and many other things, but keeping the RPM, because we didn't. Right. If we thought we could get away with 8,800, we'd turn 9,000, right? Or the crew chief made that decision. So the engines just didn't last. Where now you're kind of mandated to do that. And I think that other series in the asphalt world do the same thing. There's like might be in the super late models, a 7,800 RPM rule. So it's kept them from keeps the car owning run his engine longer. I know, Keith, when you were doing a lot of them, I'm sure they were spinning them things like crazy, right? And and they're not anymore. So maybe that is better.
Well, that brings up an interesting question. You mentioned gear rule and the rev limit. Would you rather see a gear rule that mechanically keeps it from going too high in RPM versus having just a rev chip where the crew chiefs are just going to put the gear to it to basically live on the rev limiter? Because we've seen that before too, and I can't imagine that's actually good. Does anyone like the sound of that thing hitting the rev limiter at the start-finish line?
That's the worst sound we can hear.
But we all know that the short track guys, you go to Pensacola, and that's
all you hear.
That's when the driver gets the cue when he's going to step on the brake or get off. He's down the straightaway on that chip at the flag stand all the way to the corner. It's going nuts. And you know, in NASCAR they have a gear rule. You have 2 gear ratios at each track.
Right.
I don't know if they do that in the short track world, how that would work as far as cost. And I think that the box is a once all. You know, we just put a chip in it, and that's what you got to run. So I don't know.
Most of those are quick changes too. So I guess you have to mandate what your quick change ratios would be.
It would be more to police for the officials, I think.
Yeah.
And that saved money, not only that in engine life, but you can only have 2 gears.
Correct.
So you don't have a wall of options.
Sure.
And you know, this guy's got 10 and I've got 3 and I'm at a disadvantage.
Right.
We see it in Pro Stock with the 10.5 rev limiter. And so, but they didn't stop spending. They just went and spent in another direction. And like that's the thing.
No, the
It's
guys
like,
who have money are going to spend money, right?
And isn't that ultimately what it is? If you've got money and a goal, you're going to use that money to achieve your goal, whatever it is, however you have to do it. Hiring smart people, or getting back massagers for the crew, you're going to spend it.
Well, I think about this stuff. We're talking about circle track stuff so much. I mean, John, you do a lot of stuff in the marine industry. How does that translate in? Because those things are, to me, insane and crazy. I mean, the number of engines in one boat.
Yeah, there's 2.
Yeah.
But we, right now we do a couple different marine things. One of them is they're really poker run boats, so there's no rules. They just go out and run their buddies and stuff. But there's 2 engines in a boat, and most of them are big Mercury Marine 4-valve turbocharged motors, and they're 130 mile, 160 mile an hour boats. They're 42, 45 feet long, and they're dangerous, and they're fast, and they're expensive.
Yeah.
But we don't have any rules on those. We want to keep them going. That's all. And you can really make as much power as you want with those, as long as you want to put race gas in it. But some of them can't because they're going too far, so we have to calm them down a little bit. But the other thing we work on in the Mercury, we don't work on those big engines anymore for racing, because there's not really a class for them much. The class that runs those big Mercuries right now is a spec deal, and we don't really work on those to come right from Mercury. But we're doing a lot of what they call supercats, which are big Chevys, and there's kind of fun, and there's rules. Like I said, I like a lot of rules. We have rules with those, and they have a RPM limit of 7,000 and a lift rule in the cam and some other stuff, and they're fun. They're fun to work on, and they're almost as fast. They're 135 mile an hour boats.
That's
they
way
run
fast.
an oval. They basically run a Daytona 500 out on the ocean. You know, they run oval. Mm-hmm. There's pylons and they run 4.5 miles usually, and it's cool. It's just like any other kind of racing. You know, it gets your heart rate up watching them.
I bet. So, old engines versus, we'll call it these new engines. Like, so you guys have done the R07s and these brand new type purpose-built engines versus the old one. Which one is more satisfaction in it? Or is there?
I think they both have their place. What we did a long time ago, what you had to do was, you had to be very innovative, and there was a lot more craftsmanship because we didn't. It's like John was saying, we didn't have parts back then. You had to work with what you had and try to get the best thing you could, and things are machined so well now, and it's everything fits.
Yeah, right.
It just fits.
Sometimes. So it's like, don't let me be involved in your engine build because you got to make parts to fit.
But that was an old clash with the new.
That was.
That's right.
That was taking new stuff and trying to put it in an old engine, and it did eventually fit after you bolted it into the lathe.
That's right. That's right.
Don't you think, though, that a lot of discussion about the early days? In the early days, there was not a lot of there were rules, but because less was possible, there didn't have to be quite as many rules. We're seeing on the NHRA drag racing side a little bit of a resurgence in competition eliminator, where it is kind of a wide open field of whatever, inline 6 cylinders though with turbochargers. We've got Toyotas. We've got Frankie Aragona won a championship with an inline 6. There's 2 of them on the planet. It just total. What I think to be total creativity. We're going to cut something in half and use a cylinder. As engine builders, what about that? Like clean sheet. This cylinder could work. Let's make 6 of them.
Well, you at this point in my career, you've kind of learned that you're going to start losing money on some of those projects the minute you start on them. Because they're going to. There's so much time and thought that goes into it, you really can't get paid for it, and because nobody's going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars usually on one engine, so you have to be kind of careful.
Right.
But a couple times a year I'll fall into that trap and I'll work on one that's my guys know we're losing money the minute I start on it, but it'll be whether it's my gasser, those old gassers with the straight axles,
Yes.
Greatest.
So talk about that.
That's the greatest racing on the planet. I'm telling you, that's the best thing ever.
Why?
Yeah.
Tell us why. Because I've heard that people are in love with these gassers.
Yeah, it is for me because I grew up about that time when I first started going to drag races. That's when the cars were like that popular. No starting line limiter. No, they're all 3-pedal cars. They're all clutch pedals and clutch 4 speeds and stuff, and they're hard to drive. It's a real man's race car. There's guys that built them that made a couple runs of them and got rid of them. They couldn't drive them because if they were a quarter mile, they'd be low 8 second cars, and that's a handful on a small tire with a straight axle and no aerodynamics, and it's just cool though. I mean, they're just fun, and we've done one guy and we've done really well with them, but it's a lot of work getting the motors up to speed. And
so talk about the motors a little bit. Mark, you're the first one that told me about them.
I was just going to say we should sponsor Sega. We probably will next year, but great series, love it to death. But there's one cat out there that had a Model A Ford in the series, and he's run he was a missile. And then I found out he had one of his engines in it, and it's like, hold it a second here. It was. I looked at the program as being a bit of a budget program, but I'm sorry, but when you mention your last name, the dollar signs do go up a little bit, and it's like, but these guys are serious. They're serious. They're serious racers.
No, they're
but it's family too. It's great to go in the pits and just watch these guys. They'll share anything.
But they're trying to be like 1960s, and
they do a good job.
They drive them everywhere. There's no parachutes. They drive them back after the run.
Yeah.
They'll run a whole race in the afternoon and a little bit into the night. The whole race, qualifying and everything. So it's cool.
So my understanding is, 'cause I don't know all the rules by any means, that like manifolds and stuff, like you can't run a new manifold. It has to
look old.
It's a look old. Okay.
Yeah, like an old Edelbrock. They call them a red box.
Yeah.
So you get a little bit of money in those because you have to. Well, you have to get it to look right.
That's right. On the inside.
You see, there's racers in all of us.
So much for rules.
It's like, I like rules.
But
it's got to look right.
But you're losing money the minute you start on it. But the thing that makes up for it is when you see the guy win, and you see all their family jumping up and down in the start line, everybody hugging everybody. That even if you're just watching them on a video, it really makes up for all the hard work you put in it.
Their heart's in it.
Yeah,
very much so.
It sounds like they're fun builds because they are kind of event like with Dad's. It's a blend of nostalgia, but you're still putting some new technology in there, and it makes it kind of fun.
Yeah, and the competition's tough. And there's some other guys, Gene Fulton and some of those guys, they built some stuff's bad. I mean, it's hard to beat. But there's close competition, though. There's no one guy runs up front. They trade wins. Different guy wins every weekend, and it's cool.
That's awesome.
I called John a month ago maybe, and told him about a project customers wanting to do, a blown out call deal for a nostalgia car. And first thing he tells me, he said, you're going to lose money on this job.
But he seems less concerned about that than any of us. His heart's in it so much. He just wants to do it.
It's going to happen. So,
there you go.
No, that I think that's part of it. You have to have a passion for what you're wanting to do, and it's not always about the money. It's you got to have the stuff that pays the bills. That's for certain. But there are certain projects. It's about my heart's in this. I want to see it through, and obviously with your project with the diesel thing going to Bonneville, and that seems like it should be totally tons of fun.
Yeah, we're fortunate. A lot of them are fun, or not all profitable, but most of them are fun. But I was thinking new versus old. I mean, you were talking earlier that it was hard to make back in the old day before the billet and the machinery and equipment. Well, you physically couldn't do it, what you do now, without that technology. We went beyond the limitations many times, but and found out the breaking point, and then backed up a little bit.
Right.
But now with the machining capabilities, the technology, the metallurgy of everything that's available to us.
You're right. When we first started running big engines, big mountain motors and stuff, you could really run whatever block you wanted to build. Well, today what we use is a big aluminum block that's made out of big, solid, big, square block of aluminum.
Yeah.
Well, when we first started that class, the only way you could have made that block was with chisels and hammers. You couldn't. I mean, you didn't have the technology to get that thing right with computer controlled stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's the art.
There's no way to make it.
Right. Now we have 3D printing, and you can, like Tony was saying earlier, you just make whatever you want.
Make whatever you want.
Don't you want to build a 1,000 cubic inch mountain motor engine? Musi's got a 959. They put this limitation on it. It's been a while. Everybody's kind of desensitized to 840 cubic inches, John. Don't we need a 1,000 cubic inch engine out there? Doesn't that have to happen?
I see a lot of money being spent for no good reason. That's why we're staying where we're at.
The reason is 1,000 cubic inches.
Well, that's fine, but you got 25 cars or something that all of a sudden it'd have to step up. We have to be sensible.
That makes sense. We have to be sensible.
We have customers with street cars with 1,500, 2,000 horsepower on the street. It's like, really?
Isn't that nuts?
I mean, really?
Yeah.
So there is no limit.
Yeah.
But how far do you want to go? I mean, 1,000 horsepower on the street would be almost impossible to handle.
All the way. That's how far we want to go.
About 600 or 700.
That's right. I'm okay with that. That's just enough to get in trouble right there.
Yeah.
But what is the limit? out
Factory
here?
cars with
We're-
700 horsepower.
First of all, we're
which is a lot
racers,
at
we're
the
engine
store.
builders, and we're human. Okay, so just mix all that up together, and it's a volatile mix.
Yeah, how many,
Yeah, that's
how
what I
many
was
Hellcats
thinking.
get wrapped around a telephone pole
Oh, yeah.
like 3 miles away from the dealership? This is great. Oh, pff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of begin to wrap it all up, I want to go back to Dennis real quick on Dad's project, because at the end of the day, we're going to show the video of the second engine going back on the dyno. We won't reveal the number yet, where we ended up. We kind of talked about it this morning, but the second engine, which was really quite interesting, because the first engine was the one that was hurt, and there it was laying in the shop, and you guys resurrected it. But we had tons of help, right? We bushed the lifters, we honed it, we new valve train, new springs, everything pretty much new in the valve train and that. But the second one was almost more interesting, because it was one that Cronin had freshened up and just literally been sitting on the shop. They dynoed it, sat in the floor for 20 years.
20 years.
20 years.
Wow.
And we went in there and looked inside with a borescope, and it was red as that Rottler logo, full of rust in there. And we were like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. And, got a can of Foggett from Gary, and just
That's right.
turn it over a little bit. And we ran it, and the thing made within like 1 horsepower what the dyno sheet was from 20 years ago.
Did that surprise you?
That totally surprised me.
Total seal rings?
No, they were like old school.
I'm just kidding.
Perfect circle rings, I think, or something like that. I mean, it was a 1.5, 043 top, 1.5 second, 3 millimeter oil, CP full round pistons.
What does it have to say about surface finish and preparation and everything?
Well, don't
else?
go there.
Well, it was a Molly ring. So back to what I said, but the Molly ring that could hold its own oil. And in fact, it was kind of fresh. And really, I think the Foggett, really helped kind of like turn it over, it like honed itself back a little bit. It was okay, right? But then all we did was hone it, change the pistons, went to a side relief piston, new rings. That's it. And we just put it back together, and it picked it up, like 40?
Yeah, when I came through the other day, you were looking at the numbers. I didn't see
Well, so that was after we put on the carburetor
Right.
and the fuel, right? So we went, because if a little's good, well, you got to
So there was some there too, but
Oh yeah, there was definitely some from the carburetor and the fuel going from the E85 or the E15 going to, we ran Q16, so
Yes.
oxygenated fuel, a little more aggressive. You could put more timing to it, and of course it picked it up doing that. So that combination was pretty good. But I think, just tell me just for a second, what was that experience like, being able to kind of take that old stuff and go back to it after not touching it for so many years?
really, for me, and Keith probably relate to this in our NASCAR world, because when the invention of the chassis dyno, everybody compares each other in our world, is you brought the dyno sheets over,
Right.
okay? So I was like, okay, well, dynos can be anything, right? Well, actually, no, we ran the motor and we tore it apart or whatever,
Yeah.
but I think you brought them over then. When we saw the dyno sheets, that they were so close, and it was like, okay, well, it didn't change a lot. I didn't know what to expect, but as far as the rust in the cylinder, that was just surface.
Yeah.
You know, it's still.
We could tell that when we honed it, right? We
dust,
took it over
was
to
just
Greg
a little,
Anderson's and
it
we
was a
honed
little
it.
dust on the shelf.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, we ran like 8 or 10 strokes through it and just checked it, and it was like, oh, it's all gone.
Yeah, but that was a good running engine for that day. It was.
Yeah.
That was a good engine.
733.
And we did not change the camshaft, right?
We didn't. So the second one, we didn't change the valve train at all. All we did was just hone it, new pistons, rings. That's it.
Flat tapped?
No, roller.
Not had a roller.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was an old cut motor.
Well, it was an old Bush 9-to-1 motor originally,
Understood.
and then Bob freshened them up, and
Made it
Dad bought it at
12-to-1.
an auction.
Got it.
You know.
In the compression, I think we put that back pretty much the same.
Yeah, it was within like a half a point or a couple points.
Yeah.
You know, it was like a 13-to-1 motor, something like that.
Yep.
But she was ran pretty good, so it was kind of fun.
Yep.
So anyway, so speaking of camshafts and engines in development, at the Engine Performance Expo, you know we have an LS engine. So that Engine Performance Expo LS last year made right about almost 1,300 horsepower. This year, Strader and I put a new camshaft in it. So check out what it did with a new cam.
What a day, what a day, what a day. Yeah, my brain is swollen. I've learned so much today. They told us, don't start cars. We are not going to listen.